welcome you to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast, and I'd like to continue our discussion of trees and their emblematic association with suffering and glory. Song of Solomon. Solomon was famous for knowing all of the trees. The divine wisdom that he had was taxonomic. He was able to see all of them and distinguish them into their different categories, and in doing that, he would learn about God himself. And when he writes the Song of Songs, the emblem of the King of David is a number of trees. And it's really quite beautiful, the way that it works. In Song 5, chapter 5, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem, is described with hair like the palm tree, like the fronds of a palm tree. He has cheeks of balsam. His mouth speaks like liquid myrrh, which is fragrant. Certainly that would anticipate the word of the cross when Jesus, the first word from the cross, when Jesus prays that the sin of his crucifixion would not be laid to the charge of the people, that Father would forgive them, for they know not what they do. That has to be foreseen, I think, in the liquid myrrh of Solomon's portrait of the son of David. His legs are like the cedars of Lebanon for their strength and majesty and magnitude. There's a lot of tree imagery, and I think that ultimately it speaks of Christ when he is grafted onto the tree of death, the cross, and nowhere is he more beautiful. And is there a prophetic anticipation of Christ on the cross more beautiful than chapter 5 of the Song of Songs? But the dramatic story of Solomon, Song of Solomon, of course, is his romance with Shulamit. Shulamit is the feminine form of Solomon. Both names have to do with peace, shalom. And so when we are introduced to the character of Shulamit, the bride, she is very beautiful, but she was put to work in the fields by her brothers, and in the harsh sun of the Middle East, she lost her beauty. It was marred, and she describes herself as having been blackened by the sun, and that had marred the weathered skin and dried skin. In all of that, she had lost her beauty. But she says something really quite beautiful when she sees her darling, and she's invited to describe him. She said, "He," that is Solomon, "is like an apple tree among the trees of the forest. So is my beloved among the young men." And when you think of an apple tree in blossom, it's covered with these gorgeous, beautiful white blossoms. And then, of course, in the season, they bring forth this beautiful red fruit. And the apple tree is laden down. I mean, the fruit comes forth so abundantly, and they're so heavy that they weigh down the branches. It's just very generous in its gifting, that beautiful tree, the apple tree. And she says her beloved is like that tree. And she says, "In his shade I took great delight, and sat down, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." So she sat down in the shade of the apple tree. And if the apple tree represents Christ upon the tree of death, then the shade is that he is, which for all of us applies to all of us, he shades us from the wrath of God, which he takes himself. And behind his cross, we are shielded from the full heat of the wrath of God. And only he knew that on our behalf. But Shulamit says, "In the shade of his tree, I took great delight." And what happens is, in the shade of her tree, her beauty is gradually restored, which I think is the image for all of us. It's not just our salvation, but it's our sanctification. And that is, we are made beautiful and made ready, like John will say, the bride made ready for her groom. And so the apple tree is a tree not only of sweet fruit, but it's a tree of restoration of beauty. So we see these lessons, the way that the tree is used, it's magnificent. I think we see that same power of restoration in the two emblems of the king priest. Jesus is called, he is the priest after the order of Melchizedek, which is a higher order than Aaron. And he is the king after the order of David. He is of the Davidic lineage, the tree of Jesse, the royal tree. And that, I think, is significant because the emblems of both are significant. The fact that he is a priest recalls the verification of the Aaronic priesthood. We remember that Moses wrote that Israel rejected Aaron's singularity as priest, to an office to which God had called him. And they longed for the time when all of God's people would be priests, which means they were longing for the gospel age, because now we have a universal priesthood. But it's a higher order than Aaron, it's Melchizedekian. But all of us, male and female, everyone that knows Christ is a priest in the sense that they go directly to the Father through the Son and have immediate and everlasting access to the Son. But when Aaron's right and title to the priesthood was challenged, a test was proclaimed, and Moses was told to take the priestly staff of all of the priests, of all the tribes of Israel. But the tribe of Levi, the staff he was to take was Aaron's, and his name, his mark, would be put upon that tree. And they were to be placed before the Ark of the Covenant overnight. And in the morning, when they came in, all of the rods, the staffs, were present, but the staff of Aaron, we are told, had budded and blossomed and brought forth branches. It was showing every sign of life. In fact, it bore ripened almonds. So this dead stick was able to bring forth living almonds. So life, it represented the priest who would ultimately have the power to bring forth life from death and from a dead stick. We would learn that it was of the almond tree because it would bring forth almonds and budding, all of the stages of life and fertility. The branch, it would bring forth branches and buds and blossoms and then ripened almonds. So all the stages of all the potency of life would be found within that dead staff. The same thing is true of the Davidic line, which was the tree of Jesse. And that great tree, by the time David ruled in Israel, had become a mighty empire, reigning over many peoples. And it was a mighty tree. But David sinned in the matter of Uriah the Hittite and Bathsheba, his wife. And that sin, according to the chronicler, brought down the kingdom and brought it to ruin. 14 generations from Abraham to David, it's in ascendancy. 14 generations from David until the Babylonian captivity, and everything goes into reverse. And so it's as if Isaiah said that the tree of Jesse would be chopped down. He foretold that in chapter 11. The tree of the stump of David would be all that is left from that stump, of that royal stump. And a stump is an emblem of death. There was a tree there at one time, but it has fallen and it has been sawed off, and a stump is an emblem of death and displacement. But a shoot would come up, and the fact that it can bring a shoot forth will bring forth a tree that can replace it and be even yet mightier. And that becomes the emblem in Isaiah 11, 1, of the Christ who would come forth and ultimately bring all of his enemies under his feet. So in Numbers 17, we have the story, which is the center, actually, I believe, of the book of Numbers. And so it's a focal point, the staff that brings forth life from death, and the stump that brings forth life from death shows the power, the dual power of the priest-king, who, when he would come, he would have authority over life and death. And that culminates, of course, in Christ. And what a massively beautiful image we have, again, drawn from trees in the Bible. Thank you for listening. Please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel if this has been useful to you or intriguing. To learn more, you can visit my webpage, drwarrengage.com, or find me on my Patreon account, patreon.com/Dr. Warren Gage. I hope you'll join me next time on the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. Thank you.